He mopped the floor whistling quietly while Boots stepped around him without a glance. Just another janitor keeping the military base clean, nothing more than part of the background noise of daily operations. But then something dropped from his worn jacket pocket as he bent to clean under a desk. A small metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights rolling across the spotless floor he had just finished cleaning. The room froze because what had just fallen wasn't any ordinary decoration, it was the silver star. The soldiers who had been ignoring him suddenly stopped their conversations mid-sentence, staring at the piece of metal that had transformed everything they thought they knew. Because the man with the mop wearing a simple maintenance uniform wasn't just any civilian employee. He was someone who had once stood where heroes fall, who had faced enemy fire with such courage that his nation had honored him with one of its highest military decorations. And suddenly the quiet janitor they had dismissed became someone they couldn't ignore. The silence that filled the barracks was heavy with realization and shame as young soldiers began to understand what they had been witnessing. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity or hidden credentials. This was a reminder that heroism doesn't always wear dress uniforms or carry ceremonial weapons. Sometimes courage comes quietly, carrying cleaning supplies and whistling old songs while maintaining the spaces where new generations of warriors prepare for their own test of character and commitment. But the man just bent down, slowly retrieved his medal, and tucked it back into his pocket with the same quiet dignity he brought to every task. He didn't need their recognition or their sudden attention because he had never been working for applause or acknowledgement. He had been serving in the way he knew best, keeping the spaces clean and safe where young soldiers learned the skills they might someday need to save their own lives and the lives of their brothers in arms. Welcome to Silent Salute. Before we continue this remarkable story, tell us in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. Fort Bragg stretched across the North Carolina landscape like a small city, complete with training facilities, administrative buildings, and residential areas that housed thousands of military personnel and their families. As one of the largest military installations in the United States, the base served as home to multiple units, including the renowned 82nd Airborne Division and Special Operations Command, creating an environment where military excellence was not just expected but demanded on a daily basis. Within this vast complex, the 3rd Battalion Headquarters building served as the administrative and operational center for one of the base's most active units. The 2-story brick structure housed offices, briefing rooms, equipment storage areas, and sleeping quarters where soldiers conducted the routine business of military life between training exercises and deployments. Like all military facilities, the building required constant maintenance and cleaning to meet the exacting standards that military regulations demanded. Among the civilian employees responsible for maintaining the facility was a quiet man named Robert Chin, who had worked as a janitor and maintenance technician for over 15 years. At 62 years old, Robert appeared unremarkable in his standard work uniform of navy blue shirt and matching pants with his name embroidered on a small patch above his left pocket. He arrived each morning at 6 o'clock sharp, carrying his cart of cleaning supplies and moving methodically through his assigned areas with a thoroughness that had earned him a reputation for reliability among the facility managers. Robert's routine was predictable and unobtrusive, beginning each day with the administrative offices before moving to the common areas, briefing rooms, and finally the sleeping quarters where soldiers prepared for their daily activities. He worked quietly and efficiently, speaking only when spoken to and maintaining the kind of professional invisibility that allowed military personnel to conduct their business without feeling observed or interrupted by civilian staff. To the young soldiers who encountered Robert during their daily routines, he was simply part of the background infrastructure of military life, no more noteworthy than the copy machines or coffee makers that also served their needs without requiring acknowledgement or attention. They stepped around him when he mopped floors, moved past him when he emptied trash cans, and generally treated him with the casual indifference that people often show towards service workers whose contributions they take for granted. The soldiers weren't intentionally disrespectful or unkind, they simply operated within a military culture that emphasized hierarchy, achievement, and performance in ways that naturally focused attention on combat readiness and operational excellence, rather than maintenance and support functions. Robert understood this dynamic and had never sought attention or recognition for his work, preferring to contribute to the military mission in his own quiet way. What none of the soldiers realized was that Robert's relationship with military service extended far beyond his civilian employment at Fort Bragg. His understanding of military culture, military values, and the importance of maintaining high standards wasn't learned from employee orientation sessions or facility management training. It came from his own distinguished service during some of the most dangerous combat operations of the Vietnam War. Robert Chin had enlisted in the Army in 1967 at the age of 18, driven by a combination of patriotic duty and family tradition that had seen his older brother serve in Korea and his father fight in World War II. After completing basic training and advanced individual training, Robert had been assigned to the 1st Infantry Division and deployed to Vietnam, where he would spend 2 tours of duty as an infantry soldier in some of the war's most intense combat zones. During his first deployment, Robert had served as a rifleman and later as a squad leader in operations throughout the Central Highlands and along the Cambodian border, where American forces engaged North Vietnamese Army units in conventional battles that differed significantly from the guerrilla warfare that characterized much of the Vietnam conflict. His unit had participated in major operations including search and destroy missions, base security operations, and offensive campaigns designed to disrupt enemy supply lines and communication networks. Robert's second deployment had been even more challenging, as he served with a reconnaissance unit that conducted long-range patrols deep in enemy territory, gathering intelligence and directing artillery and airstrikes against high-value targets. These missions required exceptional skill, courage, and endurance, as small teams of soldiers operated independently for weeks at a time in areas where enemy contact was not just possible but virtually certain. The mission that had earned Robert the Silver Star had taken place during his second tour, when his 5-man reconnaissance team had been inserted into a heavily defended area near the Ho Chi Minh Trail to gather intelligence on enemy troop movements and supply operations. The team had been compromised during their 3rd day in the field when they had stumbled into a much larger enemy force that had immediately surrounded their position and begun a coordinated attack designed to capture or eliminate the American soldiers. During the firefight that followed, Robert had distinguished himself by single-handedly assaulting an enemy machine gun position that had been preventing his team from reaching an extraction landing zone. Despite being wounded by shrapnel from a grenade explosion, Robert had continued his assault, killing 3 enemy soldiers and destroying their weapon before providing covering fire that allowed his teammates to reach safety. Robert's actions during that engagement had saved the lives of his 4 teammates and had allowed the team to successfully extract with critical intelligence that had led to subsequent operations against enemy supply lines. His citation for the Silver Star had specifically noted his exceptional courage under fire and his willingness to risk his own life to save his fellow soldiers, emphasizing that his actions had been above and beyond the call of duty. But Robert had never discussed his military service with his civilian co-workers at Fort Bragg and had deliberately kept his veteran status private, preferring to let his work performance speak for itself rather than trading on his military background for recognition or preferential treatment. He understood that many veterans struggled with the transition to civilian employment, and he had consciously chosen to establish his reputation based on his reliability and professionalism as a maintenance worker rather than his combat record. This decision to maintain privacy about his military service had created an ironic situation where Robert worked daily among soldiers who shared his background and values while remaining completely unaware of his own distinguished combat record. The young soldiers who stepped around him during their daily routines had no idea that the quiet janitor cleaning their facility had faced combat situations that would test their own courage and commitment in ways they couldn't imagine. Robert's approach to his civilian work reflected the same attention to detail and commitment to excellence that had characterized his military service. He understood that maintaining clean, safe facilities wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential to military readiness and effectiveness. Soldiers needed environments that met high standards so they could focus on training and preparation without distractions or concerns about basic living conditions. The irony of Robert's situation extended beyond his hidden military background to include his understanding of military culture and traditions that exceeded that of many active duty personnel. His experience in combat had taught him lessons about leadership, teamwork, and sacrifice that couldn't be learned in classroom settings or training exercises. He recognized the signs of stress and fatigue that indicated when soldiers were struggling with the demands of military life, and he often found subtle ways to make their environment more comfortable and supportive. On the morning when everything changed, Robert was following his usual routine, beginning with the administrative offices before moving to the common areas where soldiers gathered for meals, meetings, and informal conversations. The 3rd Battalion had recently returned from a training exercise, and the building was busier than usual with soldiers processing equipment, conducting debriefings, and preparing for their next assignment. Robert worked methodically through his assigned areas, emptying trash cans, dusting surfaces, and mopping floors while soldiers moved around him, conducting their business with the focused intensity that military operations demanded. He had learned to time his work to minimize disruption while ensuring that all areas met the cleanliness standards that military regulations required and that soldiers deserved. As Robert cleaned the area around a cluster of desks where several young soldiers were reviewing training reports and discussing their recent exercise, he bent down to retrieve some trash that had fallen behind one of the workstations. The movement caused something to slip from the chest pocket of his work shirt and fall to the floor with a soft metallic sound that immediately drew attention from everyone in the immediate area. The object that had fallen was a small medal suspended from a distinctive ribbon with red, white, and blue stripes that identified it as one of the military's most prestigious decorations. The silver star gleamed under the fluorescent lighting, its 5-pointed star design and distinctive coloring making it immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with military awards and decorations. The soldiers who had been working at the nearby desks stopped their conversations and stared at the medal lying on the floor, understanding immediately that what they were seeing was not a replica or commemorative item, but an actual military decoration that could only have been earned through exceptional courage and sacrifice in combat. The Silver Star ranked as the 3rd highest decoration for valor that could be awarded to members of the United States Armed Forces, making it a symbol of extraordinary heroism under fire. Robert realized what had happened and moved slowly to retrieve his medal, his movements careful and dignified despite the obvious embarrassment of having his private military service suddenly exposed to public view. He had carried the decoration in his shirt pocket for decades, not as a display of pride, but as a personal reminder of the men who had served alongside him and the commitment he had made to honor their memory through his own continued service. The silence that filled the room was heavy with realization and shame as the young soldiers began to understand the magnitude of their oversight. The quiet janitor they had been ignoring for months or years wasn't just a civilian employee performing routine maintenance duties. He was a decorated combat veteran whose courage and sacrifice had earned him recognition at the highest levels of military hierarchy. Sergeant First Class Michael Torres was the first to respond, breaking the stunned silence by calling the room to attention and rendering a sharp salute toward Robert, who was still bent over retrieving his medal. Torres had served 2 deployments in Afghanistan and understood the significance of the Silver Star, recognizing that the man they had been treating as invisible had demonstrated courage that exceeded anything most soldiers would ever be called upon to display. Robert straightened slowly and returned the salute with military precision that revealed decades of muscle memory and training. His bearing transformed instantly from that of a humble maintenance worker to that of a seasoned soldier who had faced combat and emerged with honor intact. The young soldiers who had been dismissing him as part of the background suddenly saw him with completely different eyes, understanding that they were in the presence of a genuine hero. Sergeant Torres approached Robert with obvious respect and asked permission to examine the medal that had fallen, understanding that Silver Star recipients represented an elite group of warriors whose actions had been deemed worthy of special recognition by military leadership. Robert handed over the decoration willingly, though his discomfort with the sudden attention was obvious to everyone present. The citation accompanying the Silver Star told the story of Robert's heroic actions during the reconnaissance mission that had earned him the decoration. Torres read the citation aloud to the assembled soldiers, describing how Robert had single-handedly assaulted an enemy machine gun position while wounded, saving the lives of his teammates and allowing them to complete their mission successfully. As the details of Robert's combat record became known, the atmosphere in the room underwent a complete transformation. The soldiers who had been treating him as part of the furniture began asking questions about his service, sharing their own military experiences and expressing gratitude for his example and sacrifice. They wanted to know about his unit, his deployments, and the specific circumstances that had led to his decoration for valor. Robert responded to their questions with characteristic modesty, deflecting attention from his own actions while emphasizing the contributions of his teammates and the importance of unit cohesion in combat situations. He shared lessons learned from his military service that had relevance to current operations while avoiding graphic details that might have been inappropriate for younger soldiers who had not yet experienced combat. The conversation that developed around Robert's revealed military service created an impromptu mentorship opportunity as experienced combat veterans recognized the value of learning from someone whose service had taken place during a different era. but whose lessons about courage, leadership, and sacrifice remain timeless and relevant. Word of Robert's background spread quickly through the building as soldiers shared the news with their colleagues and superiors. Within hours, Robert found himself being introduced to officers and senior enlisted personnel who wanted to thank him personally for his service and to learn from his experience and perspective on military operations and leadership. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, made a point of visiting Robert personally to express her gratitude for his service and to apologize for the unit's failure to recognize his background and contributions. Colonel Martinez understood that Robert's presence at the facility represented an invaluable resource for training and mentoring young soldiers who could benefit from his experience and wisdom. Robert's reaction to the sudden recognition was characteristically humble and professional. He appreciated the acknowledgement of his service but emphasized that he had never sought special treatment or recognition for his military background. He explained that he had chosen to keep his veteran status private because he wanted to be evaluated based on his performance as a civilian employee rather than his military record. But the colonel and other military leaders understood that Robert's experience represented an opportunity to bridge generational gaps within military culture and to connect current military operations with historical lessons learned from previous conflicts. They recognized that Robert's combination of combat experience and current facility knowledge made him uniquely qualified to contribute to unit training and readiness in ways that extended far beyond routine maintenance duties. The discovery of Robert's Silver Star led to immediate changes in how he was perceived and treated by military personnel throughout the facility. Soldiers who had previously ignored him began seeking opportunities to learn from his experience, while officers recognized his potential value as an advisor and mentor for junior personnel who could benefit from his perspective on military service and leadership. Robert's story spread beyond the immediate facility as military personnel shared the news with colleagues at other installations and through social media networks that connected active duty personnel with veteran communities. His example of quiet service and humble dedication resonated with soldiers and veterans who recognized the value of continuing to serve in whatever capacity circumstances allowed. The revelation of Robert's background also highlighted broader issues within military culture regarding the recognition and integration of veteran employees who chose to continue their service in civilian capacities. Military leaders began to understand that many installations might have similar hidden resources in the form of veteran employees whose experience and knowledge could contribute to unit effectiveness and readiness. Robert Chin's story became a teaching moment for military personnel who learned important lessons about making assumptions about people based on their current roles rather than their complete backgrounds and qualifications. The soldiers who had been ignoring him learned to recognize that service and sacrifice take many forms and that heroism doesn't always wear dress uniforms or carry ceremonial weapons. The impact of Robert's recognition extended beyond the immediate facility as military leadership implemented policies to better identify and utilize veteran employees whose experience could contribute to training readiness and unit effectiveness. Robert's example demonstrated that decorated combat veterans often continued their service in quiet, unrecognized ways that deserved acknowledgement and appreciation. In the weeks that followed Robert's revelation, he found himself in the unusual position of being both a maintenance worker and an informal advisor to military personnel who sought his perspective on leadership, combat operations, and military culture. He handled this dual role with characteristic professionalism, maintaining his regular work duties while making himself available to share his experience with soldiers who could benefit from his knowledge. Robert's story reminded everyone who encountered it that heroism often works quietly behind the scenes, maintaining the infrastructure and support systems that allow others to achieve excellence and recognition. His Silver Star represented not just his own courage and sacrifice, but the contributions of thousands of other veterans who continued to serve their communities and their nation in countless unrecognized ways. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hidden in the most ordinary places, working quietly among us without seeking recognition or acknowledgement for their past achievements or ongoing contributions. Robert Chin had spent 15 years maintaining military facilities with the same dedication and attention to detail that had earned him the Silver Star, but had never sought to trade on his combat record for special treatment or recognition. The lesson learned from Robert's story was about the importance of recognizing that everyone has a history and a story that extends beyond their current role or position. The young soldiers who had been dismissing him as part of the background learned to see beyond surface appearances, to appreciate the depth of experience and knowledge that surrounded them in unexpected places. In the end, Robert Shin didn't need recognition or special treatment to validate his service because he had always known that his contributions mattered regardless of whether others acknowledged them. But the recognition meant something to the younger generation of soldiers who learned about courage and sacrifice through his example and who gained new appreciation for the veterans who continued to serve in their communities. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how you remember them. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.